Nathalie Simper, and this is The Limitless Musician, a podcast by KE Creative. Our team helps modern musicians find modern solutions to building a sustainable music career. Along with my co-host, Dr. Catherine Eminent, we will help you learn what it takes to build a career that enhances your life instead of restricting it by becoming the limitless musician you are meant to be. Hey friend, I am back here in the studio with my two fur assistants, Teef and Chewy. Teef is pretty active, so you might hear him jingling around today. It's officially gig season, and I am personally making a conscious effort to keep my peace during this especially busy time of the year. We're almost at the end of season 2 of the Limitless Musician podcast, and I wanted to pick topics for episodes this month that would be helpful to listen to during gig season, specifically because a lot of us are in the car a lot more frequently and for longer stretches of time. And what better topic to talk about than money? I know my relationship with money as a human and a classical musician has been pretty complicated and has had a lot of its ups and downs. It can be difficult to know where to start, which information to trust, and to find a community that can encourage you to figure out what financial stability means for you, just like your communities that have helped you become the musician you are today. And I will tell you right now that I am by no means a financial expert or professional. So this episode will be mainly based on my personal experiences, what hasn't worked for me, what has worked for me, and all that good stuff. So I definitely recommend doing your own research and using this episode as just a way to brainstorm about where you want to begin and seek out financial education resources. And since I know that we have some international listeners, because I'm based in the United States, that may change how some of this information applies to you if you do not currently reside in the US. But I will definitely share the resources from real money experts in the show notes description that I'll talk about in today's episode. As a classical musician, you're very familiar with that scarcity mindset. The idea that jobs that offer financial stability are few and far between or don't even exist at all. If you're a performer, you have to say yes to every gig that comes your way because you don't want to risk saying no and closing certain doors and opportunities. If you're an educator, you make personal sacrifices on a regular basis because you're afraid of losing private students, or if you work at an institution, putting your position at that institution in jeopardy. And if you're an entrepreneur, the moment that you stop working is the moment that you stop making money. The truth is that financial stability, as we understand it, is built rather than guaranteed with any job and career that you will have in life. Having a large income does not mean that you will never struggle with money and that you've made it. Although creative careers such as those in the classical music industry are known for having less competitive salaries and wages than other careers, financial stability is something that you have the power and ability to create for yourself. So today I'm going to cover the reasons classical musicians tend to have more questions than answers about money, how gaps in traditional college music curricula delayed your desire to grow financial literacy, and why it's never too late to learn how to build your own financial stability. I'll also share my personal journey of financial literacy as someone who has had to shift my idea of personal finances many, many times, as well as tips and resources that can help you start or continue your own journey to building a healthier and better relationship with money. If you think back to your grade school days, can you remember what your financial education looked like? For me, I remember learning how to write a check and balance a checkbook in a gifted class as a third grader. And then in the 9th grade, we had a life skills course where we took one day to talk about budgeting. And that is literally all that I can remember about my financial education before going to college. Your experience could be similar or different, but most educational curricula in the United States do not prioritize financial literacy. I know that when I was preparing to go to college, I just assumed I would learn what I needed to know at the right time. Learning how to budget, save, and invest were things that were important to know. But after I graduated with my degrees and after I got a job that would basically help everything fall into place. This mindset of learning financial literacy later instead of now is built into music degree programs as well. There's this idea that if you work hard during your degree, you can guarantee job placement post graduation. And if you can guarantee a job, then you will have financial stability because it'll be built right into it. And while working hard to get a job is just the reality of adult life, there are so many steps in between that often get ignored or glossed over, such as conversations about how to manage money after you're a student, how to invest in retirement, especially as a freelancer, and how to budget to pay for your new life and your student loans. These conversations rarely happen unless you're proactive about seeking it out, or you're able to get this information from other places, or you've already received this information from your own upbringing. After 2 degrees from 2 different universities, I did not have to take any financial literacy courses because they were not required in any of my degrees. I know that now some schools are making a concerted effort to change this by adding entrepreneurship or focused financial courses for musicians, which is really great that this is happening. But unfortunately, this is still not the standard in most college degree programs. Classical musicians are trained to delay results because that's literally what you do every day. You practice now for later every single day. You won't get the job today, but when you do, you'll need to be prepared. So you practice today. And while there's really nothing we can do to change that, this delayed gratification mindset transfers to other areas of your life, including finances. I know for me, I thought that as long as I practiced hard enough, that I would be able to land a job, and then I would not only be a qualified performer, but that I would just receive this financial security because it would be part of the package. It had never occurred to me that just like my instrument, I needed to practice financial development now instead of waiting for it to arrive with a full-time job. Instead, I had to shift my mindset to if I practice creating healthy money habits now, then I can enjoy the benefits of financial stability sooner rather than later. Outside of your musicianship, your relationship with money is shaped by your experiences and lifestyle. My mom was a single parent raising 2 kids, and she worked her butt off every day to make sure that we had the basic necessities. I never wanted for anything important, and we did have more than just the bare necessities, but vacations, laptops, and other luxuries like that always came with great sacrifice. For me, I learned that money was something you worked very hard to earn and only spent when needed. And that mentality very much carried on into my adulthood. I became the person who worked 24/7 and saved every penny for a rainy day. But that rainy day didn't always show up. Spending money on non-essentials has always been really, really difficult for me, even to this day. And it's something that I've been working on and hope to continue working on. Whether you were surrounded by savers or spenders, or whether you had positive or negative experiences with money, all of these things absolutely shape the way you do or don't manage your money now. When I think back to different parts of my life where I felt like I could have or should have done more for my financial education, it's easy to feel like I failed myself. And if you're a perfectionistic musician, then you've probably kicked yourself once or twice for not making certain moves to build your financial future in the past. But just as fixating on your flaws does not make you a better musician, focusing on the should haves and the could haves does not make your financial situation any better. Acknowledging where you are now and where you want to be in terms of finances is a great first step in choosing to make progress. And that's what really brings about change, as you see in practicing your instrument. The first time I thought about money differently was post-master's degree when I worked at a federal student loan servicing company. And I refer to this time as working for the dark side. I learned more about student loans on that first day of orientation at the job than I did as an 18-year-old signing up for my own student loans. I remember thinking, why don't they explain it like this before you sign up for your loans instead of letting like 18-year-olds who are just fresh, brand new adults making these really big, important decisions? Basically, this job helped me have a better understanding of the reality of student loans, as well as the resources available to make them manageable to repay versus feeling like it was a death sentence. I felt empowered, and instead of dreading to pay them back, I felt really good about myself for fulfilling this responsibility, especially now that I understood it better. Another major mental shift came after I got married just a couple of years ago. As someone who always saw money as a means to fulfill my needs and nothing more, my husband had a very different view of money. For him, it was a way to experience life, new things, and to bring enjoyment. This was the exact opposite of how I had experienced money because I always saved to do the fun stuff later, but later never came because I always found a reason to postpone or to justify a necessary purchase over doing the fun stuff. But he really began to open my mind to the idea that money isn't always something to be hoarded away forever, but it's something that could help me experience the life that I was perpetually saving for. When I think of the memories and the experiences that have come from balancing both approaches to money, I can appreciate that spending money doesn't always mean it's wasteful, even when the purpose isn't to fulfill a basic necessity. If you've been following the podcast this season, then you may remember that I set some personal goals for myself in that first episode back in August. Goals about prioritizing my health and wellness, and financial literacy has really become a part of those goals. I haven't always felt positively about money, my understanding of financial planning, and what I've been doing to build my own financial stability. I don't always know what I'm doing, but I can say that I feel better about money now than I did back in August, and definitely better than I felt about it back in January. And I hope to see that trend continue. When I say that I feel better, it doesn't mean that I don't ever worry about money or that I've got everything figured out for myself. But it does mean that I can see progress in what I'm doing versus where I started with my first money memories. And I can start to see elements of financial stability in what I'm doing now. So I'm going to share what I've done to learn about finances and practice financial literacy as an entrepreneur, what's worked for me, and what has changed as my lifestyle and my work life have also changed. If you've already downloaded the Musician's Real World Survival Guide on the K Creative website, I go kind of into the light version of what I'm about to break down in that guide. So if you're already familiar with that, then you'll get a clearer picture now of how I've learned and put all of that information into practice. Firstly, I started with a good old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet to track my income and expenses. Nowadays, there are apps like Rocket Money and Monarch Money that can help do the heavy lifting if you'd rather not go the spreadsheet route. At first, I was kind of scared to see all of my money habits in one location where the numbers didn't lie and I couldn't run from them either. But being open to seeing how you spend and save is the simplest way to truly understand your current money habits. Knowing how much you spend on groceries, streaming services, emergency expenses, and everything else will give you a clear idea of how your income fulfills your needs and wants. Do you make enough money to cover your bills, save, and splurge a little? Or are you breaking even each month? I've been using a spreadsheet for years now, at least like 5 or 6 years. And I take one day each month to sit down and plug everything into the spreadsheet. I use it to see how my spending changes in different categories each month and where I can improve on sticking to my budget. It can also show me where I have room to spend more or less in a certain month and how to plan ahead for that. So, a great example of that for me and my family is that, we have a lot of celebrations like birthdays and anniversaries in a very short amount of time, like between February and March. And since it's so close to December, which tends to be a high spending month for most people, I spread out the gift expenses May through September for Christmas and other holidays so that I'm not spending any more than our usual budget in December. That way, we can spend a little bit more in our celebration months in February and March without having to dip into savings or to put it all on a credit card. The last thing I'll say about a spreadsheet is that it's my favorite tool when tax season comes around because I've already done the heavy lifting of compiling all of my business expenses and income for the previous year. All I have to do is plug in the numbers, and it makes filing my taxes so much easier, especially because I file them for myself. Each year, I know better which expense categories I need to track, which purchases can be considered business expenses, and how to separate personal and entrepreneurial finances to make things simpler. My next point follows along the same lines, separating your personal and business finances. If you're freelancing and working multiple jobs with varied income each month, then it's not as straightforward as just waiting for your biweekly paychecks and your W-2 every year. As a sole proprietor or someone who is self-employed, having a system to keep your money separated can help you understand how much money you're really making, how much you're spending on your business and investing into the business, such as sheet music, instrument maintenance, travel, and how much is left over to pay yourself. Separating your finances can be as simple as making separate bank accounts. And as a sole proprietor, you can talk to your bank institution to see your options for opening a business bank account. In the US, some banks will allow you to open business accounts through the identification number you use when you file your taxes. I personally have a setup like this where I have a business debit card and savings account because for my private studio, I have an LLC. When I fill in my spreadsheet each month, I can clearly see the financial picture of my personal life and my business without having to sort through every single transaction and deposit. And ultimately, this really works for me, but it may work differently for you. So definitely consider your options and do your research before you jump in on opening all of these bank accounts. But I know personally for me, having a clear line in my finances has helped me truly understand how much of my musician income goes into taxes, how much invests back into the business, and how much goes towards my paycheck for personal finances. This has made it much easier to budget month to month, even though my income is different each month. I can better anticipate what I would make in December versus May, and I have learned which months I need to save more in order to balance the effects of a variable income so that when I have months where I make a little less, it doesn't feel like I have to strap and scrap. Third, I've had to unlearn the scarcity mindset of avoiding all unnecessary spending. And unnecessary is subjective because what is unnecessary to me may not be unnecessary to someone else. If you've ever started a new diet or exercise routine, you probably get super excited to go all in at the very beginning, but then you eventually slip or you forget a workout session, and then you feel so guilty for messing up that you're like, well, I just might as well just give up entirely. Something I've learned in my financial journey is that the more I deprive myself of spending that can be viewed as non-essential, the more often I slip, the more often I feel guilty or I start to shame myself, and the more often that cycle perpetuates. For me, I love getting massages because my back is usually just like one huge knot. This is totally a luxury and not something that everyone will see as essential. But for me, it's a necessity because playing an instrument involves my entire body. So I want to feel my best and I want to invest in things that will help me do that. So instead of guilting myself out of buying that massage, I spent time to research ways to get consistent and affordable massages, and I adjusted my budget to make room for the cost. I cut back on eating out and other spending that felt truly unnecessary for me in my life and that I knew I wasn't going to miss. And now I look forward to my deep tissue massage with Marvin at the beginning of every month. If you want to enjoy your creature comforts like morning coffee, eating at your favorite restaurant, or investing in a hobby, you can totally find a sustainable way to enjoy your comforts without breaking the bank. Maybe buy your favorite coffee blend in bulk every other month and make it at home instead of ordering coffee every day. Maybe instead of eating fast food once a week, save that money and then treat yourself to that favorite restaurant each month. These are just a few examples of how you could make adjustments to add the comforts that feel like necessities for your current stage in life. My fourth tip is to avoid debt whenever possible. As someone who has relied on a credit card before, I wholeheartedly believe in only spending money that is yours and not someone else's whenever possible. Student loans, personal loans, car loans, and credit cards give you money to spend, but that money is technically someone else's. I have seen a lot, especially when we talk to clients and we talk to individuals looking for career support, that, often classical musicians will be willing to go into debt for an instrument upgrade because the belief is that the better your equipment is, the better chance you have at landing that dream orchestral job. And while there is some truth in that, you definitely need quality equipment for your career, you still need to eat, live, and sustain yourself between going into debt for a new instrument and potentially getting that dream job. So I definitely recommend doing your research. And if going into debt is something that is unavoidable, then have a plan for repayment and try not to get too in over your head so that it does not feel like a death sentence. There are programs and resources to help you manage debt, to repay debt, and learn how to save and budget for a major purchase like a new instrument. I've never used these resources outside of just simple saving, so I can't really speak to what those programs do and how effective they are. However, I do know that there's a lot of information out there, including from the money experts I will share about later in the episode. The biggest way that I've been able to manage debt on a personal level is to be aware of how much I make, how much I spend, and putting together a reasonable budget to live on so that I can make better decisions about how to pay my debt down. It's been a slow but steady process, and the more I've stuck to it, the more it feels like just a normal part of my life instead of a reason to shame and guilt myself. My last bit of advice, and I've said this several times this episode, but it's worth repeating again, is that what works for you may not work for someone else. Even though everyone has to deal with money and finances, it's deeply individualized. Find your system and what feels best for managing your money and building your own financial stability. Because what works exactly for me doesn't work for Catherine, and it doesn't work for others in my social circle. The easiest way to find what works for you is to just try something and adjust it as needed. For example, I used to set time aside each week to go through my finances, but that was really overwhelming for me, and it became difficult to want to dive into my finances. I tried money tracking apps as well, and I found that I was too removed from my financial details. So now the system that I have is that I pick one Friday a month to run through my spreadsheet, compare numbers from the previous months, and make plans about how I will stick to my budget or prepare for long-term financial goals next month. I usually put on my Discover Weekly playlist on Spotify, and my favorite snack is nearby to sweeten the deal. Outside of the monthly management of my finances, I pick one book chapter, one podcast episode, or one online resource to digest each week so that I can learn beyond what I'm doing now. The topic I'm currently focused on is learning more about investing, both in retirement and stock market. I feel completely clueless about these things because I never had exposure to them. And the adults in my life when I was a child were definitely not talking about them or doing them at all. So although it feels like a huge undertaking for me, I'm trying to find a pace to learn these things that can help me build on my positive associations with money. My motivation to be proactive with my financial education came about around March of this year. I had had my spreadsheet routine for a few years and I'd gotten my rhythm down, but I knew that retirement and stock market investment were huge gaps in my knowledge, especially as a self-employed individual. I did what anyone else might do these days, and I took a deep dive into my Instagram algorithm for a place to start. I came across Tori Dunlap and her business, Her First 100K. Her book, Financial Feminist, really helped me understand why I had always struggled to feel confident about money. There were real stories of real people who I could relate to and their experiences on how they had to learn to have a healthy relationship with money. So my first recommendation for places to start would be the Financial Feminist book and the podcast. I think that the principles and guidance in both of these resources can be helpful for women and men alike. So I'll include those links to the book and the podcast in the show notes. Another recommendation is Vivian Tu, who is your rich BFF on social media. She has tons of reels that break down complicated finance topics into simpler pieces, a book called Well Endowed that is available for pre-order, and the Net Worth and Chill Pod. She's also big on using everyday examples to explain concepts. So if you're the kind of learner who thrives on that, she's a really good first stop. My last sentiment on money is that your best resource is an open mindset. You can seek out all the resources and pay for all the expert advice, but what I've learned is that approaching finances as something that can grow and evolve with you can take the dread out and replace it with curiosity. And as someone who loves to learn, leaning into being curious and open to learning has made my own financial journey more enjoyable and a natural part of everything else in my life that grows with me. My hope is that little by little, the stereotype of starving musicians who always scrounge for money will be further away from the reality that you can be a musician and you can have a healthy relationship with money too. I hope this episode has given you a thoughtful way to spend your time traveling around during gig season. So we have one more episode in this season before we start the new year with season 3. If you have topics that you want covered by me and Catherine, or a special guest, please send me a DM on Instagram with what you want covered. I want to keep this podcast centered on you and all the listeners who are looking for a community for modern musicians. So as always, I'll see you next time. Bye. That's all for today's episode on The Limitless Musician. If you liked this episode, follow us on Instagram at The Limitless Musician to tell us what you want to hear next. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive content that won't show up anywhere else by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time.